When the police arrived at the home, they were looking for a stolen truck. But what they found inside the family's shed was truly terrifying. Welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be one of the craziest stories of a lifetime. When the police entered the shed, they had no idea what they were about to find. The news story behind this video happened in 2016, but it's still talked about today because of how strange it was. The police were called after someone reported seeing a stolen truck enter a driveway and then disappear inside of a shed. They knew exactly which shed I was talking about, and that it belonged to a well-known family in the area. But what they didn't know was that the family had a very dark secret hidden away in that shed. The police began searching the property, but before they knocked on the door, they decided to search the shed first. As they crept closer to the shed, they could hear sounds coming from inside of it. It sounded like screams, laughter, and chains dragging metal moans. What on earth could be happening inside? Let's take a look. As the police opened up the doors, they were met with a scene straight out of a horror movie. There was a small group of people standing around a wooden table covered in what looked like pentagrams and other strange symbols. The police had no idea what any of it meant, but they did know that it was time for them to make their presence known. The police shouted, "Get down on the ground," but some of the people in the shed didn't seem to respond. Instead, they continued to do whatever they were doing before the police interrupted them. One of the people at the table seemed to panic and ran to the back of the shed. The police chased after him, but he was fast and managed to hide behind some boxes. "Get out here!" shouted the police, but the man refused to come out. After several minutes of arguing, the police finally got the man to come out. He was sweating and clearly scared of what was about to happen next. The police cuffed him and brought him over to the table to sit down. One of the police officers noticed something strange on his shirt. It was covered in blood. And when the officer wiped it off, he realized it wasn't paint or anything like that. It was real blood. The man had tried to clean himself up, but it was too late. He was already covered in blood, and now the police were suspicious that he may have done something really terrible. The man explained that he had cut himself shaving and that's why there was blood on his clothes. The police weren't convinced, but they had bigger problems on their hands. One of the women at the table was screaming and thrashing around. She kept repeating, "He's dead. He's dead." At first, the police thought she was referring to the man they had just arrested, but soon realized that she was talking about something else entirely. The police were getting more and more worried as the situation began to get out of hand. They needed to get to the bottom of what was going on in this shed and fast. But before we continue with this crazy story, if you haven't already, please consider leaving a like on this video. It will help our channel tremendously and allows us to keep making these videos for you. Now back to the video. The police searched the rest of the shed and found two other men. Both of them were covered in blood and looked like they hadn't bathed in days. The police asked them what had happened and why there was so much blood everywhere, but neither of them would talk. It was almost as if they had been coached to stay silent. The police were growing impatient and frustrated. They had been at the shed for hours and still didn't know what was going on. That's when they decided to bring in a canine. The dog sniffed around the shed and then let out a loud bark. It had found something. The police followed the dog to a corner of the shed where they found a large black suitcase. They opened it up and found a bloody meat cleaver. The police were starting to think that there had been a murder in the shed, but they still didn't know who was the victim. Suddenly, one of the men at the table started laughing. He was laughing hysterically and couldn't stop himself. The police were concerned that he might be mentally unstable and asked him to calm down. But he just kept laughing. Finally, he stopped and looked at the police. "You want to know what happened?" he asked. The police nodded. "We need answers," he said. "I'm sorry, but your friend isn't here anymore." He motioned to the back of the shed, where the police found a set of stairs leading down into a basement. The police went over and opened the door. They could hear a faint sound of movement coming from inside, like someone was moving around in the darkness. They turned on the light and were met with another horrifying scene. In front of them was a dungeon. In the middle of the room was a wooden box with what looked like chains attached to it. The police cautiously approached the box, and one of them reached out to open it. As the lid creaked open, the stench of decay filled the air. The police quickly backed away and called for backup. Soon the entire shed was swarming with police officers. They carefully descended the stairs into the basement and began searching for whoever was down there. The officers were using flashlights to peer into every crevice and corner. The basement was dark and dank, and it seemed like it had been years since anyone had been down there. Then, through the darkness, they saw a faint glow. It was coming from under one of the boxes. The police moved the box and were horrified by what they saw. Underneath was a human skeleton. The skeleton was wearing shackles and chains, and it looked like it had been there for a long time. The police were shaken by what they had just found. It was clear that this was no ordinary shed. What they had stumbled upon was a secret that had been buried for years. The police were determined to get to the bottom of what had happened here and who was responsible. Meanwhile, the 3 men and 2 women who had been in the shed were being questioned separately. The man who had tried to flee was identified as David. The man with the bloodied clothes was identified as John, and the other man who had remained silent was identified as James. The woman who had screamed, "He's dead, he's dead," was identified as Mary, and the other woman was identified as Susan. The police were able to piece together what had happened by talking to the 5 people. It was a gruesome tale of torture and murder. David admitted that he, John, and James had been working on a project in the shed. They had been trying to create a portal to another dimension using a ritual and a large machine they had built. They believed that if they performed the ritual correctly, they would be able to travel to another dimension where they would be all-powerful. However, things went wrong during the ritual, and they accidentally created a rift in space-time. The rift opened up, and a creature from another dimension came through. The creature was evil and sadistic and began torturing the men. It chained them up and beat them with a meat cleaver, killing them one by one. David claimed that John and James had been killed by the creature, but he had managed to escape. He hid in the basement until the police arrived. He had seen the horror of what the creature was capable of, and he was terrified that it would come for him. The creature must have sensed danger, because it had retreated back into the other dimension when the police arrived. David begged the police to believe him, but they didn't. They arrested him and charged him with the murders of John and James. As for the women, Mary and Susan, they had been brought to the shed by force. The men had needed help performing the ritual, and they had taken the women from their homes against their will. The police released the women without charging them. Meanwhile, David's lawyer tried to convince the police that his client was innocent. He claimed that David had been framed and that the police had jumped to conclusions. The lawyer demanded that the police investigate the possibility that the creature from another dimension was real, but the police refused. They believed that David was guilty and that he had killed John and James in a fit of madness. As the trial began, David maintained his innocence. He told the jury that he had been telling the truth about the creature and that he had nothing to do with the murders. However, the jury didn't believe him and found him guilty of 2 counts of murder. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. After the trial, the police continued to investigate the case. They brought in experts to examine the basement and the artifacts found in the shed, but they were unable to come to any definitive conclusions. The mystery of the shed remained unsolved. Some people believe that David was innocent, and that there really was a creature from another dimension that had killed John and James. Others believe that David was guilty, and that he had made up the story about the creature to avoid prison. Whatever the truth may be, the case of the shed remains one of the most terrifying unsolved mysteries of our time. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe for more content. Have a great day, and see you next time.